rollback and tariffs in the cards to get a trade deal done with China. Both sides reportedly weighing that option as they get closer to putting pen to paper. Edward Lawrence, live in Washington with more. Hey, Edward.
Hey, Dagan, good to see you. Now, the feeling of goodwill between the U.S. and China in the trade is starting now to seep into tariffs. Now, people familiar with the talks are telling us that China would roll back tariffs as part of a trade deal. In an op-ed in Chinese state media, it says the cancellation of U.S. tariffs already imposed should be a necessary condition for reaching an agreement. Now, the anonymous writer is said to be close to the trade talks on the Chinese side. Now, the Chinese have been working throughout this process to get tariffs removed or repealed, especially tariffs set for December 15th. As of right now, those are still set to be added. The trade talks are still happening almost daily in phone conversations at the deputy level. The two sides are also trying to find a location to sign a phase one trade deal once the language gets finalized. Now, President Donald Trump has mentioned Iowa. Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley chairs the Senate Finance Committee. The director of communications for that committee says this, quote, Senator Grassley would welcome a visit by Presidents Trump and Xi to Iowa. The statement goes on to say farmers in particular have been hard hit by the trade war and deserve recognition for their sacrifice. And there has been no prepping on the ground in Iowa and no location selected yet. But still, a spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry did not rule out a trip to the U.S. by the Chinese president. He says that the two presidents remain in contact through various means. Dagan?
Edward, thank you for that. Edward Lawrence in Washington. How likely is it that the United States will roll back those tariffs to get China on board? For all that, let's welcome former Trump trade and jobs advisor Curtis Ellis. Does the president know that the economy is his ticket to getting reelected next year, and that if he wants to keep seeing these new all-time highs in the stock market, something needs to get done and now?
Well, you're right. The economy is his ticket to getting reelected. And look what we're having. The economy continues to defy all expectations. From the moment he first imposed tariffs on China, people were predicting the sky would fall and the economy would stall and the stock market would crash and unemployment would skyrocket. None of that has happened, because what we're seeing is that as jobs come back to America and wages increase and people have more spending power, consumer optimism is at an all-time high, small business optimism is high, and that's what's propelling the economy. And of course, China wants to get rid of these tariffs. They've been pushing because that's the only thing that's gotten them to the negotiating table.
Well, but manufacturing, because I was one of those naysayers, not saying that the sky wasn't Chicken Little, but again, manufacturing has contracted 3 months in a row, and it is the U.S. consumer that is holding up the economy right now. And the tariffs that are being talked about at being pulled back, cutting tariffs, the 15% on the $111 billion in Chinese imports that was imposed on September the 1st, it's those very tariffs that retailers and apparel producers were worried because it hits the consumer directly. So this would seem like not only, to use that word, appeasement of China or moving or basically giving something to get something in a trade deal, but also good to make sure that the consumer stays healthy.
Well, remember, you can't be a consumer unless you're first a producer. You have to earn money to spend money. And that's what President Trump's policy is all about, is boosting American wages, boosting the buying power and the consuming power, if you will, of the American population by increasing jobs and increasing the opportunities here. So that's what America First policies is about bringing jobs back to this hemisphere, to this country. So we have to keep that in mind. Now, when apparel was made here, when a lot of these things that were made overseas were made here, people had more buying power and more spending power.
What's the harm in rolling back some of these tariffs if it means getting a phase one deal done?
Well,
is there any harm in rolling back the tariffs at this point?
Well,
some of them.
Well, it could be seen as appeasement and a sign of weakness on the part of China. This is the only thing that's gotten them to the negotiating table. We need to get them to stop stealing and stop cheating and living up to the agreements they've made. And in this sense, I feel like we've been here before. We thought we had an agreement in May. We were ready to sign it. Everybody was expected. And then they pulled back at the last minute. This is their negotiating strategy. Get everybody emotionally invested in an agreement and then pull back and hope that the inertia and momentum will make them sign a less than optimum agreement.
Do you think that investors are getting out over their skis, so to speak, here?
They could be. They could be. We have to wait and see. All of these leaks, anonymous leaks, you have to be very suspicious because Bob Lighthizer runs a very tight ship. He does not leak. And anybody who leaks in Washington, as you know, Dagan, is trying to advance their own agenda.
Well, let's see how what happens with those tariffs. Thank you so much, Curtis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Curtis Ellis.